Welcome to the Infill Podcast, where we interview the most interesting members of the 3D printing and maker communities, live and with audience participation. And now, here is your host, Jonathan Levy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome for what is a very, very special treat. I'm so excited about this episode because we're going to get to meet and better get to know one of the preeminent content creators in the space, someone who's been around more than I think pretty much any of us in the 3D printing and making space. I'm talking, of course, about Angus over at Muse, who recently celebrated an amazing milestone, 1 million subscribers. You all know Angus. He's into robotics, 3D printing, making music, and many other cool and amazing hobbies. And today, I'm really just excited to get to know him and his journey and his story outside of the projects, and get to know really how he got down this incredible journey that is 3D printing. Angus, welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I'm really, really excited to get to know you. I know our audiences as well. And many of them tuning in live are super excited that it's actually during the day for them in Europe. So
awesome. Yeah, it's just about 5 o'clock at night. So it's winter, so we're slowly losing the sun. But yeah, I appreciate you doing a time slot I could attend.
Absolutely. Angus, Tell me a bit about your journey. For those who don't know and haven't seen every single one of your videos, I'm sure you've shared it in bits and pieces, but tell us your story of how you got into 3D printing, when it became a YouTube channel. You actually came from the industrial 3D printing world, so fill me in.
For sure, yeah. So I actually studied industrial design at UTS, which is a technology uni in Sydney, and essentially we were using these really expensive Stratasys 3D printers to print out prototypes, and we're talking at cost prices of like $300 Australian for like one prototype for a uni student. That was like completely unreasonable. So I really wanted to use these machines because, I mean, they're magical, right? You 3D design something and then you let it just run overnight, and then the next day you've got a physical thing that you can use. But I couldn't afford it. And then just at the time, this is like looking at 2010 to 2012, these sort of RepRap machines were sort of becoming more popular, which is like the open source movement of making 3D printers. But then they started becoming more available as like ready to run machines.
Yep.
And I remember I bought a Tier Time Up Mini in 2012. It was like 1,000 something Australian, way more than I could afford. Like I literally emptied my bank account to buy it. And I overnight, basically, it came broken, so I had to learn how to fix it from shipping. So I 3D modeled the part, held the bed in place while it printed this part so I could fix it. And then overnight, my world changed, because from there, I could literally design anything I wanted, send it, and then print, right? And that perfectly sort of positioned me in that space as it grew, because I knew how these more hobby level machines worked. So after uni, I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And there was this sort of startup, which was the 3D printing studio. And they were like, I got to know the guys and like, okay, we'd love to have you work for us. And I got into the whole 3D printing on demand market, which is where you literally have people coming off the street being like, I want to print this. Mm-hmm. How does it work? And that gave me exposure to, the whole myriad of 3D printers that were coming out at the time that weren't great, but they were available. Like you're looking at like the MakerBot Replicator,
right?
The Bits from Bytes BFB 300, which literally non-heated bed, and they said it printed ABS. Like people were trying to use super glue to stick stuff down to the bed. So it sort of gave you this sort of hands-on exposure to this industry as it was rapidly forming, and this sort of knowledge base of how these machines worked. And after a while, I realized that people are asking me the same questions again and again. They're like, is this machine good? How do I save an STL out of my software? How do I print, ABS and that? So I had already set up, I'd used YouTube before, but more for just, uploading videos and sharing them with friends. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to make like a tutorial or a quick review on this machine. Mm-hmm. And next time someone asks me the question, instead of spending 10 minutes or 15 minutes like repeating the same thing, I can just, here's the link, that should answer your question.
Right.
And then people all around the world started commenting and watching the videos I was making.
Funny how that works, huh?
Yeah, funny how that works. And then I remember like the first time a company reached out to me was actually a 3D scanning company, which was Shining 3D. And I remember I was at work and this huge 3D scanning box came. And my boss is like, "Oh, we didn't order a 3D scanner." And I'm like, "Nah, it's for me."
Wow.
That's for my like YouTube channel. And from there, it just basically grew into its own entity. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do printing on demand anymore. I'm just going to focus
Yeah.
on YouTube. And here we
So
are,
printing
10
in
years later.
demand, was it when you said you got into printing on demand, you did that as a part of a bigger company?
For sure. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I did it on my own as well, but I didn't have the capital to buy the machines because, yeah, to get like even just a sort of basic MakerBot replicator was a few $1,000s.
Yeah.
And
And you're fresh out of
like,
college.
yeah, fresh out of college. Yeah, some of them were like $5,000 for the premium prosumer ones,
Huh.
which again didn't really work that well. You
And
know,
your role there, were you mostly working on the printers, or I know you're also very proficient in CAD software. So what were you doing there at the print on demand company?
jack of all trades. So
Yeah.
like literally, someone would come in with a idea, and
Mhm.
I would be responsible for sketching it up in CAD,
Wow.
making sure it was printable, making sure the printer was working, fixing the printer because it usually wasn't working, trying to print it, and then delivering the final product. So literally
Wow.
start to finish. Yeah.
That's amazing. And what good experience for what you were going to then go on and do with the YouTube channel. It
Yeah.
explains why you really understand every aspect of this hobby. At what point did you take off from the job and say, okay, wait a minute, this YouTube thing could actually sustain my life?
It was an interesting transition because the studio I was working for eventually, the guy didn't want to put investment in to properly buy real machines to print. So it got to the point where we were trying to do jobs for mining companies on hobby level machines. And I was coming in very stressed, very frustrated, like this isn't working. And at the same time, the YouTube thing was transitioning and growing. And I think I had like only 25,000 subscribers or something at the time.
Yeah.
But I built up a bit of a nest egg and I could see the momentum building.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to go full into this. And I was going to work 9 to 5 and then coming home and editing till like midnight and then letting the file upload because we had like ADSL2. So
Right.
it was like when you upload, you crash the internet and it takes several hours to upload one 10-minute video.
Oh my
So I had this sort
gosh.
of schedule where I'd let it run up like at night when no one was using the internet so then I could post it the next day. And it got to the point where I'm like, okay, it's going somewhere. And I ended up moving back in with my parents
Wow.
to give myself like a 6 month runway, I guess,
Yeah.
to really focus on it, which was like start of 2015.
That's
And then
very
from there,
smart. And
went up. Yeah.
I started a lot of businesses growing up, and my first one that actually grew and became over $1 million business was when I was young, like 16. And people always ask me,
Cool.
like, what's the best advice you want to give to kids that want to go into entrepreneurship? And the best advice is start early, and it's not necessarily because of the experience that you will get years and years. It's just because the earlier you start, the less risk you have, right? Today, when I want to start a business, I have 2 kids in private daycare and a mortgage and a family and a this and a car payment. It's like I have to really be sure. I can't afford to just fail and learn. But when you're, fresh out of college or move back in with your folks, it's so much easier to start a business because the pressure comes way down. You can make the right decision, not the financial decision.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, even in high school, and that kids like it's almost like it goes against the grain of what you're taught. You should study hard, go to college, get a degree,
Yeah.
go into an industry, work your way out the ranks. But really, like, I didn't know how good I had it in high school. Are you coming home, doing your basic homework if you could be bothered? And then I
Right.
was building robots at the time, so I was literally
Right.
like under the house, learning CAD, learning how to solder, all of that. And in terms of like risk, yes, absolutely. The older you get, the more responsibilities you have,
Right.
and you can't risk that failure, um, like you can when you don't have that.
Absolutely. And so I don't want to ask you financial questions, but I do want to ask, because you went to school for design and engineering. Feel free not to answer this question, but has YouTube, let me rephrase the question. You went to school for design and engineering. It's very clear to all of us who watch your videos that you would not rather do anything else. You love YouTube. Is that a financial sacrifice for you based on what you could earn as an engineer, or is it comparable, or, and you don't have to answer that if you don't want to.
Oh no, absolutely. So I didn't actually study engineering. I studied industrial design.
Right. Sorry.
So the different, yeah. So I like to see it as like you're a sort of a cheating engineer because you get to do the fun stuff. You do the concepts. You do the early CAD, and then the engineers have to make it physically work. They have to do the
Right.
calculations. They have to do
Right.
the mold design, all of that. So from an industrial design degree, you can jump into automotive design, you can jump into point of sale design, or you can go, into like consumer products. I was unusual because I liked the engineering side of industrial design. So I like to wrap my head around the entire thing, which is why like I think I could design a decent 3D printer, for example, because I understand the mechanics as well as the consumer side of things. With in terms of getting an industrial design job in Australia, they basically don't exist.
Really?
Like, yeah, there's a handful of industrial design jobs of actual doing that, designing concepts for an industry. Like a lot of my friends ended up reskilling or in adjacent fields, but like they'd end up in point of sale, which is like you literally design, a display for a product or stuff like that. It's really tough. So you kind of have to go overseas if you want a really good industrial design job.
Yeah.
And of course, the pay, it's not bad, but it's not great. It's only
not
good if you get to the
engineering.
senior
Yeah.
end. It's not instant six-figure salary, right? It's
Okay.
definitely not that. So with YouTube, initially, like I was being paid pretty well as a CAD, printing on demand sort of
Right.
guy. But with YouTube, it sort of quickly did overtake that to
Wow.
the point where with my HEXTET, which is like our government's university help.
Okay.
So that's where they'll give you a loan. It's better than America's system because it's only indexed, which is like they adjust it for inflation. They don't charge you interest as such, but it's still a significant amount. Like mine was like 30,000 Australian dollars for a degree, which was helpful, but also a lot of it was very self-driven because I knew what I wanted. And then when you get your income, it's they charge you. You have to pay that back, and it sort of ramps up the more you have to pay back. It got to the point a couple of years later that my accountant's like, so you have to pay the rest of your health debt this year. And,
Wow.
I was like, I don't really have that money set aside. So that was an interesting situation.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
I have so many questions. I'm really excited to have you on. You talked about industrial design, and we were rapping a little bit before about open source and things like that. This must be a very exciting couple of years for you in 3D printing because you're finally seeing actual industrial design and consumer-focused design come into the 3D printer market. I wonder if you want to comment on that besides the whole, I mean, we're all saying the same thing, right? Something changed big time, and we all know why, and we all know who. But is this like vindicating for you, having studied industrial design? I mean, like, oh, someone's actually making beautiful products now.
Yeah, it's really nice to see actual user interface come into these machines. They're not just the cheapest components you can slap together, put them in a box, ship them off to someone. If they work, you're lucky, kind of thing. And I actually stopped doing reviews for a good 2 years or so because with the Ender 3, these machines behind me, they were like the catalyst for a lot of people to get into 3D printing because they were the cheapest of the cheap machines that kind of worked. And with Naomi Wu making them open source, they kind of set the bar for what a cheap 3D printer would be. So for 2 years, we just saw endless bed slingers that didn't do anything different.
Right.
Like they're like, oh, this one has a different hot end, this one has a different bed surface, but they're all essentially the same. But then, those who remain nameless came along, and literally you go from these identical machines to something that stands out and does well. Like it's easy to use from the box. It's literally add plug and play for a 3D printer. Sorry, my chair's slowly sinking.
Right.
And that's awesome because, I personally view 3D printers as a tool. I view them as something that I can use to make my designs work as conveniently and as quickly as possible. I don't really view them as a machine I want to tinker with. And that's always been a differentiating factor for me. Yeah.
That surprises me as someone who builds robots, but I guess for you, it's a means to build a robot that you want to build. You know, it's like people who enjoy building robots don't enjoy building their own Makita drill. So why would they enjoy building their own 3D printer? It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Like I learned how 3D printers work and how to fix them because I had to. Because they didn't. But I would have been very happy to not have to do that and just use them to build other things. Yeah.
That's really cool. Does that mean we're never going to see a Voron build on Maker's Muse?
Yeah, probably not, actually.
Really?
Because I do like kits, but that is a kit. Like that is a lot of time and effort and tuning and calibration. I know you've gone through that.
I've gone through it, and I have 2 unbuilt ones sitting on my shelves that I haven't had time to do. So yeah.
Like I'm more likely to spend that time and energy designing something that doesn't exist and making it real.
Yep. Which I admire the hell out of, and you have the background to do. You and I both share, I think, some contrarian views on open source, where we love it, but we don't think it's the end-all be-all dogma that we all have to follow. I'm interested. We talked a little bit before we hit record about Joe's blog post and how like something has to change, and then we talked a little bit about Dr. Tao coming on the show and saying like, yes, we have patents. We're not patent trolling. We're licensing our patents. And that's blasphemy to a lot of the community. But you shared something with me that I'd love if you share with the audience, just your perspective on, where patents have a place, acknowledging the fact that the patent system is broken worldwide. We all know that. I think we all acknowledge
100%.
The patent system is broken. But you know what? Because you view these as a tool, tell me a little bit about your thoughts on patents. And you came from the Stratasys world, so.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. So, I mean, we have FDM because of Stratasys. Now, there's a lot of murkiness with the evolution and beginnings of 3D printing, especially with SLA, with resin. There was like three parallel teams or more, I don't know, working on SLA at the same time, but one got the patent first, right?
Right.
So, yes, you have to incentivize R&D, and you have to get your money back for that. I totally understand that. But at the same time, if everything's just instantly disseminated, and this is what we saw with the Ender 3, you'll have someone who will always be willing to do something cheaper without quality control and more dodgy, which will take away from the person that released that information in the first place.
Right.
And it's interesting because like open source, your payback is almost because you're making that information freely available. Like you're saying, I'm doing this based on other people who made it freely available, but by doing so, I also have to make it freely available.
Right.
But if you have to play by that rule set, which really doesn't work that well for hardware. It works okay for software,
right?
Because you can have attributions and blah, 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 and then the software you create, it has to be the same license. But when it comes to hardware, you have a nozzle. Let's say you have a cool nozzle and you've open sourced it. Someone's just going to, with huge manufacturing capability, just be like, okay, I'm going to make 100,000 of them and undercut you, which we've seen time and time again with various, very innovative hot end and extruder companies.
Right. And I'll add as well, not to interrupt you, but like when I think about open source, I grew up in Silicon Valley, right? So I think about Linux, I think about Firefox, I think about software, right? That's open source. And in those scenarios, the organization, I won't say the company, but the organization behind it is benefiting 2 ways, right? They're contributing, but then other people are basically, they have thousands of people all over the world helping them improve their software. When was the last time, I don't know that this happens, but I haven't looked through the GitHub, but when was the last time thousands of people helped Prusa develop their open source designs, right? Prusa is putting so much out and making it available open source, but they're not getting the reciprocation from the community besides maybe feedback of, hey, this worked, this didn't work. And I think that's part of the problem, right? Is they are contributing and investing so much energy, even in Prusa Slicer, right? They've got, I think it's 3 or 5 full-time devs developing that software. How many people are actually helping build it versus forking it and making their own slicer. I think it's like one organization. I sympathize with Prusa because it's one organization funding the spoils for all of us, right? This
Yeah.
like tragedy of the commons situation.
Prusa is an interesting case because it's pretty clear for them that Prusa Slicer is almost an advertising tool
Right.
for them.
Right.
And then it gets the name out there. But I think you said the word community. To
Mhm.
me, that's what open source embodies. It's
Right.
like a community effort. When you
Right.
have a giant company doing things and developing things, yeah, you're right. How is someone going to feed something back in beyond like a bug request?
Right.
Like they could develop something. Is the team at Prusa Research who's working on Prusa Slicer full time going to do it, taking their stuff in, or are they just going to do it themselves?
Right.
The way
And
that they're
knowing, by
already
the
doing.
way, what's happening, like what's down the pipeline. You see,
Yeah,
Linux exists, it's its own ecosystem, and it doesn't need to think about like, okay, what hardware is it going to be built on, which is why they can merge requests from anyone, right? But with Prusa, it's like, okay, we know what's changing in our hardware and we can't make that information available, so other people can't realistically contribute.
no, and like the Prusa Mark for example, as far as I'm aware, the files aren't released.
Correct.
So it's open source at some point, and
Right.
I would say that's probably because they don't want it to be instantly copied, like so many other things have been.
Yeah. And I support that
They're trying to
completely.
protect it. They're trying to protect their R&D using an open source model, which it's not really designed to do.
Right. And I mean, I purchased this house using my own IP and royalties for my books and courses. And
Right.
I know what it feels like to have my books and courses pirated and distributed illegally, and other people selling my IP, which is what's happening with one-to-one carbon copy clones on AliExpress. It's not fun, right?
No.
And so, yeah, I think we've really reached the limits of the open source model. And at the same time, we can't get around the fact that we are building on the shoulders of Adrian Boyers and things like that, that people like that who made this stuff open source. So at some point for someone to turn around and go, okay, now I'm commercializing this, there is maybe a problem there. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not an IP lawyer.
it's interesting because for a company to start off closed source is almost better than a company to start off open source and then go closed,
Oh, yeah.
because that's what MakerBot did.
Right.
So with the Replicator 2X, they turned around to the community and said, we're going closed source, even though it was all built on community contributions,
Right.
which at the time was a massive outcry. Like
Right.
everyone was like, what? How
There was
dare
a whole
you? Like,
documentary about it, actually, on Netflix.
yeah. That was the big shift from for the community to for profit. Like it was like
Yeah.
an overnight shift in community feelings towards it.
Yeah. And at the same time, you said, for you, it's all about empowering creativity through technology. And at the end of the day, whatever gets us the best tool, right? It's like the whole like capitalism versus communism argument. It's like whatever leads to the best outcome for people, human beings, whatever leads to the best outcome for the most people is the right system, right? Like let's leave dogma out of it. And I don't think we definitely get Vorons with open source, which are like spend 40 hours and then another 40 tinkering. We don't get to the Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon without patents and investors, a lot of venture capital funds. We don't get those things in an open source model. And I think open source creates evolutionary improvements, but closed source and venture capital, that creates revolutionary improvements, at least from my experience.
It can do. The two can cross over. Like there's been
Yeah.
some incredible developments from open source that have crept into closed source machines.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that people need to remember is like, because they're scared when you go to closed source. Okay, you've got the cloud, you've got DRM, you've got all these awful sort of words that you sort of think of. But people can vote with their wallets. If a company like Bamboo Lab goes, oh, you have to buy our filament for the next version of machine, people are going to say, well, screw that, I'm not buying it, because other companies will capitalize on that and be like, ours is open still.
Yeah.
So when it comes to actually driving, because people are scared of getting pigeonholed into like this. We've seen it with like inkjet printers, like this crappy world of, oh, you can't scan something because you don't have ink, right? Stuff like that.
Yep.
We don't want it to happen with 3D printers. I totally get that. But at the same time, like, you can decide what you're buying. Like, you
Totally.
don't we're not in that world. At least hopefully it doesn't happen, and at least not for a very long time.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think it really does come down to what is your guiding kind of factor for purchasing? Is it beliefs and ethos and morals, or are you viewing it as a tool and you just want the best tool?
Yeah,
There are people who
like,
won't buy products from certain companies because of the way they behave in the world. There are people who won't buy Apple products because there have been some concerns about labor. And there are people who say, I just want the absolute best product. That's probably a
yeah,
bad
and
example, but
no, it's interesting. Like, everyone's requirements are different, which is why, like, I even made a whole video course about it, but no one seems to want to know what they want to be told what the best 3D printer is. They don't want to do the research for themselves. But there is no best. It
right,
doesn't exist. It's the best to someone's specific requirements.
right,
And if you want to learn, how to modify config files and how motion dynamics work and how things are assembled, then yeah, like an open source kit might be the best for someone.
right.
But for a lot of people that are coming to the space now, they are not tech savvy. They are not. They don't know how to solder an electronic circuit together, for example.
Right.
They're clever. They're creative. In my opinion, shouldn't they have access to 3D printing technology as well?
100%.
And it just, like, that tech for them would probably be something that's closed because it's out of the box,
Yep.
does its thing. You don't modify it. That's fine as long as it works and has good warranty.
Right.
That's what you're paying for.
Right. Which, by the way, you perfectly timed that segue to reminding me that I do need to thank today's video sponsor, which is PCBWay. Speaking of soldering, you guys say soldering, but we say soldering.
Solder. There's an
Yeah,
L.
yeah. And let's see if I have a screen share here. I do. So PCBWay is a wonderful one-stop shop, not just for PCBs, but also for injection molding, CNC machining, metal 3D printing, sheet metal folding, and many, many other things. If you, like me, don't know how to design PCBs, they also have a list, a workshop, a entire website full of all the incredible and amazing projects that other people have uploaded, and you just need to click and you can build that project. And then, Angus, you have used PCBWay for a lot of really cool projects that you're making. I thought a really cool part of this sponsored segment could be you sharing a recent project you did with PCBWay.
Yeah, I'm actually still working on it, but PCBWay, not a lot of people know, but they don't just do PCBs. They have, like, this whole manufacturing hub as well.
Mm-hmm.
So a while ago, I worked with them to make some really cool CNC machine parts for a combat robot. But this time, I'm making a little one,
Nice.
which I like to sort of push the limits of what they offer. So I was like, I want titanium blades. So they machined titanium blades for me for
Wow.
this. And the frame, it's HP's, I forgot the
MDF.
acronym for it, but yeah, multi-jet fusion.
MJF, yeah.
Which is a crazy, crazy process. High detail nylon, which you can't really do at home. So
Amazing.
that video is hopefully coming soon. But yeah, they've been great for that.
Wow. And what do parts like that cost on PCBWay? Because titanium sounds very expensive.
The titanium was because it's a really challenging material to machine.
Yeah.
I can't remember the price for that, but the 3D printed parts are pretty cheap. They're like $20 to $40.
That's amazing,
each.
including shipping and all that. That's amazing.
Yeah. And the turnaround's really fast for the 3D printed parts too. The machining, not so much, because I think for titanium they had to do a specialty process. I'm not sure if they've actually machined them or they've used wire EDM, which is like a really crazy process. Because I'm looking in the corners and, like, there's like the roughness that comes from wire EDM. So I mean, as long as it gets the part done, it's a hard material, so that's pretty cool. I don't think they even list it
So cool.
as an option. But
This is by far the best sponsor read for PCBWay ever, because usually I'm just like, projects, but
yeah.
So very cool. Now, we talked about, what's the best machine for each person. What is the current best machine for Angus's needs?
It is the one that is working at the time that I can quickly send stuff to. So wireless helps.
Yeah.
The X1 Carbon is usually the go-to at the moment,
Same.
but my P1P has a bed leveling issue now. So it's, you know how it's got those force sensors?
Yeah.
So there's 3 force sensors. It says one of them is reading too low. And they have a really good troubleshooting guide, but I haven't been able to fix it yet. So that's the thing about going back to closed source. As long as it works, it's the best. But if something's broken, it gets a bit not very good. So at the moment, I'm using the X1 Carbon heaps. But yeah, the P1P, I would like to get up and running too, because it's pretty quick.
So for me, it's still the case that my X1 is the printer I use the most. It's not my favorite printer because the IKEA effect with the Voron is very, very prominent. Right? It's like when you spend 40 hours building something by yourself with your own hands, like you love it like it's your firstborn child.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the printer I go to the most. And my Voron is not my most reliable printer in any sense of the word. So very, very cool. What's the last thing you printed, by the way?
That's a good question. I print stuff constantly. I've been working on like a tech sword, so I printed the handle for that. But that's that's just a personal project. How
many printers do you think you have at this point?
I don't know. I don't know. When I take on reviews, I tend to do them in batches. Like I said, I hadn't reviewed machines for a long time.
Yeah.
And every machine you take on, you need space for it, so you're testing it. So I'm testing the Prusa Mark IV at the moment, and I've also got the Mark III S Plus to compare to, because I think it's really important to compare the two. SVO7, I've actually been using that quite a bit since I got a nice profile for it.
Yeah.
It's when I unboxed that, I was like, oh no, what is this? Because the BQ Huracan looks the same. Like it's almost the same. It's a clipperized Ender 3 basically.
Right.
And I really didn't enjoy that machine. But once I got a profile working for the SVO7, I'm like, it's actually quite good. So that's still being used.
Yeah. That's my second most or third most used printer right now. It's running constantly.
Nice.
Yeah.
I did have one issue with it. Straight after I filmed the review, the extruder stopped working, like it was jamming up. And the little grub screw and the dual feeder gears, it had backed out, and it was slowly chewing the aluminium housing. So I opened it up to find like all this metal swarf everywhere, because it just backed out. Because these are pre-production units, they must have not tightened it quite enough.
Right.
But that was interesting.
By the way, someone from Bamboo Lab in the chat was like, I really hope that Angus has already opened a support ticket for your P1P. So that's customer service right there.
That is good customer service. I haven't had time for that yet. They have the error codes that go to tell you what. I think it's just come loose. But I just need the time to do that, and we're always perpetually time poor in this industry.
Yeah, it's a real struggle. Like I realized the other day, like the last 2 product reviews, I don't do reviews. One, because I'm often sent printers and paid to talk about them, but I will give my opinions and say like, hey, I'm going to share my opinion, but I've been compensated. This is not an unbiased review. And the last 2 that I did, I really liked. Like, and then the sad thing is, like, the hobbyist, I really want to play with those printers more. I want to get the SVO7, play with the macros, get it better, because you and I both noticed that, the clipper install is not really fully fleshed out. And I really want to see what that resin printer, the Anycubic 12K, can do. But I right now can't make content out of it. So it's just a waste of time. I have to move on. I'm playing with the Creality K1 now. I still have 2 Vorons to build. So it's like, you're constantly on this treadmill, and you can't even like turn your head around and be like, hey, what was last? Nope. Like that printer is going to have to sit until I have extra time to actually play with it and enjoy it. So.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I was on the content treadmill hard for like 2018, 2019. Like I did nothing except YouTube basically.
Right.
And I actually had to like stop and be like, I want to do personal projects, because when you think of everything as, can I make content out of it? It actually really, I found anyway, like really hobbles creativity. Yes. And a a lot of the channel growth came from some really viral videos early on. So I had like these crazy mechanisms or like strange rolling objects like sphericons. I don't know if you ever seen those
Right.
videos like back in the day. They got like millions upon millions of views, and they sort of pushed me into this awful like algorithmic thinking where I'm like, oh, I just need to do
More
another
weird
weird
shit. Yeah.
thing. Yeah, and it doesn't work like that. It like YouTube will give you just a random spike on one video, and then the others just won't.
Right.
It's so much of it is just chance, like getting
Yeah.
this all your ducks lined up. So I was like, okay, I got to stop and do what I want. And it's so funny because I got back into combat robotic videos lately, and I thought no one's going to watch this. I'm doing it just for myself. I don't
Right.
care. I can tax expense all my robots by making a video out of it, and then people are watching it. So
That's
it's
awesome.
so interesting. Like if you don't focus solely on just making algorithm driven content, you actually tend to make better content. I've found.
I'm really glad to hear you
Just
say that. And that's such good advice because the algorithm is very much pushing me down lists of cool things you can 3D print and organization, right? If I just made videos
yeah,
about all the gridfinity and honeycomb wall stuff that I'm printing all the time, like that would please the algorithm. But as you said, it's super hobbling to creativity. And at the same time, I've done a couple like, okay, let me expand my horizons and do a workshop build video, and it tanks. So I really appreciate you saying that because it's a reminder to like, don't give up. Like, film some stuff with the table saw, film some stuff with a CNC, and like try and expand. Because every time I have tried to expand, like the BMO laser cutter, total tank, resin videos, total
mm.
tank. It's like, just show us cool 3D prints, and I don't want to get pigeonholed into it, you know?
No, that's very true because yeah, if you do go just down one type of content, you do get pigeonholed, and you eventually your audience will get bored of it.
Right.
I think that's how it tends to happen. Like you can do something that's really popular, and then it just drops off. And look, that happened to me with the sort of cockatoo videos. I
Right.
like I love these birds. They're really fascinating. They're really smart. And the first video was done just as an indulgent video. Like we were stuck in lockdown. I was bored, and I just was like, "What's it gonna do?" And that video did insanely well. But then the other ones, again, progressively worse, worse, worse. And you think, what am I doing wrong? Blah, 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 blah. So I still test the cockatoos. I just don't film it because I know that I'm better off making content of other stuff.
Right.
Like it's a joy to me. I don't have to try to make that particular thing content to try to follow this path that I was sort of being pushed down, I guess.
Right. Right. I guess you kind of half answered this, but I think it's a different question, which is I think it's very interesting, like all the greats in this industry besides yourself, right? So the Joels, the Stefans, the Thomas, the Uncle Jessies, they're all at this 400, 500, Zach Friedman, this 400, 500. Your channel just crossed 1 million subscribers.
Mm,
Congratulations. As you said to me
thank you.
earlier when I congratulated you, it is just a number, but it
Yeah.
also does communicate something that you've done very successfully, which is you are breaking outside of our little niche and you're appealing to more people and bringing more people into create a creative hobby that brings us all so much joy, which I think is an ideal that we all aspire to. So what do you think it is about your channel that has allowed you to bring more people into the fold than even those who've been doing this for as long as you, like Joel?
Yeah, for sure. So I tend to have like a three-way split between video types. So I'll do the reviews. I don't make any money off reviews. They waste my time. I get frustrated. They're the most
Yep.
annoying content to make, but it benefits the community. So I tend to do reviews for like that sort of relevance and authority kind of slant.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to attracting other people into 3D printing, that's when the random projects I'll do
Okay.
will fit in. So, like the cockatoo puzzle, one of my favorite comments was someone said, I heard like Angus's voice in another room and I didn't know what's going on. My wife was watching your cockatoo video,
That's awesome.
which is like, that's exactly what it was doing. It was getting people to watch something about, it had 3D printing in it, but it wasn't about 3D printing. That people who would normally never ever watch a video like that were actually interested in it. And then from that you might get a small trickle down number who will be like, okay, what is 3D printing? And then they'll find like the reviews or they'll find the tutorials, Again, tutorials are difficult to monetize because they're so niche, but I
Right.
find that they're sort of like a perpetual content. So you do a good tutorial, people will search for it and they'll find it 4 years later, for
Right.
example. And it continually gets that content, which again is good for establishing like that you know what you're talking about, and you're someone that I can get value out of.
Right.
So I'll keep watching and learn. And I've come across people who have come across my really early tutorials and then gone on to do much more advanced things than me. Like they've gone into aerospace, they've gone into industries that are well beyond what I do, but they start at the same sort of 3D printing, 3D CAD
Very
space.
cool.
Yeah. So that's sort of, I think, what happens. I'll make a random video sometimes that my core audience won't really care about,
Right.
but then someone outside of 3D printing will be like, oh, that's interesting. And then they might start following for the 3D printing content.
That's really good motivation again for me to hear right now. And I'm sure any other content creators watching, which is like, it sounds like you just do the things that you're passionate about, and the algorithm rewards you for it. So right now I'm really
It
passionate about the
heavily,
studio build, and I should probably just do more videos, even though the last one bombed.
yeah. And I guess that's also the aspect of it. Like, if you view it as like, oh, it didn't get that many views, therefore it bombed. Like going into a video expecting a view count it's really hard to not do that.
Right.
But I found if you just like try to distance yourself from expecting 50,000 views or something on something, and just be like, I'm doing it because maybe a couple of people will find this useful,
Yeah.
and then being happy with that. That's something that's like a mental trick I've had to teach myself. Because
Right.
again, when you get like viral videos are they're kind of toxic, because you'll get this rush of like, oh, 100,000 views in 24 hours, like
Right.
200, like what is happening? And then it starts dropping off, and then it drops off more, and then you get that like my baseline view, if I don't upload, is 45,000 views for 48 hours, which is
Wow.
very low for a million sub channel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But every time you post, it spikes, blah blah blah. So it's getting that mindset of being okay. Well, that's fine if I upload something and it gets a small amount of view. Doesn't really matter as long as I enjoyed making it, and then move on to the next one.
Right. Right. For me, I do this calculation in my head of opportunity cost, right? Like now I'm paying rent in central Tel Aviv for a studio. I have two
Sure.
employees full time, right? Because I have a family, so I have to outsource if I'm going to get so much done, right? And then I do in my head, like I know what my expenses are every month. It's in the many thousands of dollars, right? And every video needs to do a certain amount of views and revenue. A lot of my sponsor agreements are based on performance. So it's like
Interesting. I
almost
would
I've
never
almost
agree to
created
something
a
like that.
situation where I can't afford for a video to bomb, which is a bad place to
Yeah.
be, because that means I'm not at liberty to be as creative as I want to be. So
Yeah. I'm terrified of that, to be honest. So I edit all my own videos. I don't have any staff, and I film from my house.
yeah.
So I have expenses, but I could be like, I'm just not going to upload for 2 months,
Right.
and I'd probably be okay.
Right.
Like, there's enough backlog to trickle along. Um, in terms of getting like a studio on that, I would be terrified of, because YouTube's unpredictable.
It is.
And not only is the algorithm, but there's the socio-economic aspects of things. Like, December's the best month because everyone's advertising for Christmas. That's not in our control. That's completely
Right.
separate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is again partly why I don't really rely on AdSense, especially these days. I tend to rely on product sales and
Right.
like other things like that, because they are much more within my control.
True. True.
Yeah.
I look at it really as an investment. Like I'm in the fortunate position where I can afford for the business to fail, and I can afford to not take a salary from it for now. Um, and I just look at it as like, some people raise money to start a business or take on small business loans. And some people are able to I'm able to fund it from sponsors and AdSense and affiliate and all the stuff we talked about. But it's like my investment is like, I'm not really taking a salary that's worth note, and if it pays out into a bigger business, great. If not, I have to say I'm enjoying it so much more than what I was doing
Yeah.
before this, which wasn't bad, but I love this. And there are a lot of people in the chat as well, by the way. saying how much they love you and how one of them became a CNC machine programmer because he discovered 3D printing and maker hobbies through your videos. Cool. JM Silapan says, I got into the 3D printing hobby business because of you guys. Salute. So that is awesome. We do have a couple questions that people have submitted, and one of them actually is for me. Are there any mods you are wanting to do on your Voron? I have a lot. I'm doing the Dies Design filament runout sensor because it's crazy to have a printer that big and that fast with no filament runout sensor. And then touchscreen from Big Tree Tech. I just haven't had time because I either need to turn it into content on a printer that I built almost a year ago or do it on my own free time. And then Mallet Fills, who I know who that is, and you might know who that is, but someone in the industry asks, what does your dream 3D printer look like and what can it do? Great question.
So, yeah. So, again, the X1 Carbon comes close, but it does.
That's going to be a not helpful answer because that's someone from Bamboo Lab.
Yeah, I know. Like, we've printed PLA Plus for so many years just because you couldn't print ABS on a cheap machine without it warping.
Right.
But now we're getting these awesome materials like carbon fiber nylon, proper like nice polycarbonate blends that are like the stuff Polymaker's making, like literally indestructible.
Yeah.
That you can print without worrying about it warping and destroying your printer fast. The perfect machine is one that I can literally, design my thing, send it to it, and then I get a part like an hour later that I can just chuck into my prototyping process without worrying about it failing. And if it's good enough, I would have like 5 of them because then you just, you 5x your production speed.
Right.
And
I think that the Bamboo is close. It's pretty close to that, right? There is
it's very close.
The lead screws, it's been telling me for 2 weeks to lubricate my lead screws. Don't void my warranty, Cedric. I need to get around to it. I have the High Performance grease here that we all got with a review. Did you get this? The High Performance grease?
I think I did, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to put that on, and because it's high performance. But other than that, like basic maintenance that any mechanical thing has to do, the one thing I will say, and this is something someone reached out to me. And someone built one of these for the Bamboo, if there were some kind of solenoid or something that removes my parts, and there have been kind of open source community projects that do this, like that would just take the productivity of the printer to the next point. Because at some point, right, it's going to be the middle of the night, or I leave this printer running here and I go to the office. And then it's like, unless I'm going to come all the way home, I'm going to lose 6 hours of print time. So if someone could come up with even if it could be like a universal, right? You mount it onto different printers and there's different models in the way that there's different kinds of Revos. There's the Revo Voron, the Revo Mini, the Revo 6, right? So kind of claw or solenoid. I haven't thought about this fully. For Vorons, there is a way to do it, right? Where the bed
I don't see why you couldn't, because with the print surfaces we have now, when the parts are cold, they just self-release. So I don't see why you couldn't have a bar that just scrapes across, pushes them into a little bucket. Tier Time had a machine that it had like a stack of beds, and it would like sort of push them into the existing bed.
Oh, that's smart.
And then it would like eject the other one. The problem was it was essentially like a budget cantilever printer in a huge box for a lot of money, but it had that feature. So you could do, but the PEI beds, just have them flex off and then have another one slide on if you wanted to. But yeah, that's the next big thing. The problem is a lot of companies trying to do that right now. The cost, the justification isn't there, because you would just do it yourself. You set an alarm, or the time savings isn't worth the cost of the retrofitting.
And as you say this, I'm realizing, like, you just said that you would happily buy five printers if it did X, Y, and Z. But if it did that, you would buy 1 or 2, because you would just set it for a week and walk away. Like, basically, if the printer has 0 downtime and you don't need, you and I are not hiring people for 24-hour shifts, right, to do it's for us. And if the machine is going to run itself and you're going to set a 1 week print queue and you never have to go touch it except for once every 6 months, clean the carbon rods, you're going to buy fewer of them. So there is an inherent disincentive for manufacturers to come out with these solutions.
It's true. I think for a lot of design iteration, you don't want something that's going to run for a week pumping out parts. You want something that's going to run overnight, and then you have everything you need for that iteration.
Right.
So that's where you can't print faster with one machine that keeps changing beds, but you can print faster if you have 5 machines, because then you can print 5 beds at once.
True.
And I found even no matter how fast like the X1's carbon is, if you fill the bed of it, it's still like going to be a 10, 15, 20 hour print, depending on how big those parts are.
Right.
So that's still like a decent night cycle if you can time things decently.
It really does come down to the timing of things. I think it also makes a big difference if you're prototyping versus like, for me, I'm doing projects like this honeycomb wall. I have to print 65 panels like that. Just the panels. Then we're talking about so for what I've done, and it's very clever. I saw someone else do this. I'm stacking them and then putting a layer of PETG in between so it doesn't actually stick, and then I can rip them. So I can leave it overnight and it'll print for 12 hours. But then you have trade-offs, right? Like there's way more chance of failure because the PETG might not bind well, might not hold, and then your surface texture of each one is going to be different, and blah, 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 blah. So for me, being able to be like, I want 50 of these bins, and I don't want to wait until the entire, Gridfinity bins, for example, I want 50 of them, and I don't want to wait until all 50 are done. Just pop them off one at a time. Would be so amazing.
And that's also like you're almost using your printer as like for batch production,
right?
Not prototyping, and that's like almost where I sort of think printing hundreds of things that are identical, you should just injection mold them. That's like where I sort of tend to shift my attention,
right?
Because there is a certain cutoff, right? Like every printed part will cost the same amount of money and take the same amount of time. Whereas injection molding, if you reach a certain level, it's like they're all super cheap, but you need lots of them.
Yeah. I wonder if we'll ever get to a point where there are consumer injection molding machines.
There is, but they suck.
Yeah.
The speed of them is very low because when you put the molten plastic into the mold, you have to cool the mold really quickly. So in industrial injection molding, I'm not sure if you know, they've got like all these cooling channels.
Right.
So they can like instantly cool the mold, pop the parts out, a couple of seconds cycle time. Whereas all these homebrew ones, you have to like push it down, or like maybe you got a pneumatic cylinder to do it, wait a certain amount of time, open it up with like some screws, take the part out, put it back together. Yeah. It's more of just you like the process, you're not doing it for actually speeding up your production.
Right. It sounds like one of those, home espresso setups, which it's not like a barista's setup, but you enjoy the process. It does make me wonder though, what other kinds of, because you are recording from home, what other kinds of machinery do you have? Do you have a lathe? Do you have a table saw? Do you have CNC machines? What else you got over there?
I would love to have, I used to have a lathe. I had to sell it because I couldn't move it with me when we were renting originally. I would love to have a lathe again. I just don't have the space yet. We've got under the house a huge amount of space that's like unsealed. So originally, if you go back a couple of years when I was filming, I had some resin review videos like under the house. And I was like, oh, this is a perfect space to do prototyping and to do workshop stuff. And we had 2 years of rain. So like everything in there went moldy, like everything. MDF shelves, the printers rusted. It became a literal biohazard. Wow. So I, as much as I'd love to have a CNC, like milling machine, lathe, even just a manual milling machine is super handy.
Yep.
There's just nowhere to put it. So I have like, luckily through the combat robot stuff, I have like a huge network of friends who have a lathe or a CNC. So I'll be like, okay, hey, can I get this made? And they'll be more than happy.
That's cool.
So for really large projects, you sort of want to route them out of a single piece of material, like if you can get away with it. So I'll just buy some cheap MDF and get it full sheet routed into a plate. And then use that.
I've been working on building. Actually, one of my awesome subscribers came and hung out and built the Two Trees 450 CNC, TT 450. Nice. We can't get it working still, but I'm excited to have a CNC.
It's surprising because CAM is so much further behind than slicing. which is weird because it came out so much before. Like G code is literally what's used in CNC machines.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Fusion hobbled the cheap or free version of CAM as well.
Yeah.
They removed rapids, which is not okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even get the hardware
Yeah.
working. There's something
Oh,
seriously
God.
wrong with it. But we'll save that for a product review. Angus, I do have one
Fair.
question from the audience, which I thought was adorable. Living Room Workbench wants to know, will we ever get more Cockatoo videos, or will it stay for your own enjoyment forever?
I sort of have defaulted into doing them as a sort of Christmas holiday period kind of video.
Cool.
So it's a bit indulgent, and I am working on one for Christmas.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah,
I've found,
so
I
there
don't know
will
if
be
you do
something.
this, but I don't really like the whole shorts thing, but I do use them as an outlet where it's like, I really want to share this. I'm excited about it, but it doesn't make sense to do a 15-minute video about it. So I'll just use shorts to relieve that kind of creative outlet. And that's been fun.
Yeah. I do have a second channel, but I just found no one watched it, like no one migrated it to it. So
Right.
I do sometimes do fun things on there, but yeah, shorts are, the more I'm pushed to do something, the less I want to do it. So I'm just like, nah, not touching it.
Awesome. Well, Angus, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate folks tuning in. We got a great turnout despite the time. Obviously, everyone knows how to reach your YouTube channel, but what's one thing that we can do to support you and ensure your success?
Sure. Well, a lot of the 3D models that I show on the channel are available for free or for just a couple of bucks over on the makersmuse.com store. And people
Awesome.
can go there, check it out. I'm about to release a pack. So I'm going to open source in America, in San Francisco.
Awesome. If I'd known, I might have booked a ticket.
Oh, it's in July. So I am trying to figure out how to pay for the flights because they are astronomical right now. So I'm doing a special pack soon. So I'm going to release a video probably tonight about that.
All right. We will put that in the comment, in the description, themakersmuse.com to support Angus.
Yeah.
All right,
cheers.
my friend. Well, hey, I really
Thanks for
appreciate
having me.
you coming on the show. This was awesome getting to know you and your story and just learning from you. So thanks so much for coming
It's
on.
been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right, my friend. Let's stay in touch.
You too. Thanks, Jonathan.
And
Thanks for tuning in to the Infill Podcast. For show notes or links to anything mentioned in today's episode, visit thenextlayer.com. If you enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to leave us a review wherever you're listening, or click the like button to let us know. And consider subscribing to The Next Layer on YouTube so you can tune in live and participate in the next conversation. We'll see you on The Next Layer.